Hello, everyone, and welcome to CADSA Nationals podcast series, A League of Our Own. My name is Aaron Duncan, and I'm your host, as well as the education coordinator for CADSA National, which is the Coalition for African Diaspora Student Athletes. CADSA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to enhancing the overall Black student athlete experience through the promotion of inclusivity of race, gender, sexual orientation, class, and ability throughout intercollegiate athletics. Um, our vision is to unite Black student athletes throughout the country in collective action to combat the anti-Black racism that student athletes within the diaspora face from their universities and the NCAA system at large. In this podcast series, we will be highlighting the experiences and efforts of Black student athlete leaders to combat these oppressive forces. We hope that by centering Black student athlete voices and experiences, we can enlighten our viewers about the institutional challenges that we face and also inspire others to use their platforms to create change within college athletics. Our first guest is a fourth year student athlete on the soccer team at Clark University, not to be confused with Clark Atlanta in Worcester, Massachusetts. She is pursuing a BA in psychology with a minor in biology and is also the first Black captain of the women's soccer team in program history. She is the recipient of the Inaugural President's Achievement Award for Inclusive Excellence and has been listed as a Dean's List recipient for 4 straight years, in addition to being a 3-time NEWMAC Academic All-Conference Team honoree. Everyone, please welcome Inonge Kaloustian.
Hi, thank you all for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to, talk about my experiences on the women's soccer team at Clark University and also, with the founding of my organization, the Clark Athletics Inclusion Coalition.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, Inonge. Bear with me. This is my first time doing a podcast, so if I'm a little shaky, I apologize, or if I take pauses. But so yeah, we're just gonna hop straight into it from here. And I wanted to start by asking you about just everything that's been going on throughout the past year. Like we know that this past year has been devastating in a lot of ways, like for our country, and especially for those of us who identify as Black. So I wanted to ask, what are some ways you have been taking care of yourself during this time?
That's a good question. I feel like it's a tough question to ask, especially for people who do organizing on any level. The campus organizing scene can kind of be, it can kind of get overwhelming sometimes. And obviously, it's definitely important to take care of ourselves. And I think, honestly, the main thing that I've been trying to do is just stay in contact with my friends, especially my Black friends here on campus, just because, this past year has been so honestly devastating for our community. I just found that it's really important to stay connected, and as I'm about to graduate, I want to hold on to these connections after I leave Massachusetts. So that's mainly the biggest reason that I've been taking care of myself.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely feel what you were saying right there. Like for myself also, like just because it's been really hard to um keep communities together during this time, especially in spaces where college athletes, are used to being, because there is that barrier, that physical barrier where, we're not in the natural social environments to interact with one another. So that's something I've been struggling with. And I know like once I do see or talk to one of my like really close friends, like we always talk for a long time, like longer than usual now, because there's like longer periods of time where we go without speaking to one another. So,
Right.
so yeah, I definitely feel that. Are there any new hobbies or habits that you've developed that you hope maybe to carry with you once everything returns back to normal?
I don't know about new hobbies. I'm trying to get back into yoga. That was something I kind of stumbled upon, I guess, 2 summers ago now. I was volunteering at this yoga studio in exchange for free classes because it's too expensive for me. But I got really into it, and then just obviously yoga studios are closed for the most part, so I haven't been able to do that. But just trying to like get back into it on my own. That's like the biggest thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. yoga is not easy. I
No,
remember
so hard.
it's not. I remember we started doing yoga like the days after our football games, and so like we would all go in there like expecting it to be like relaxing and like time off after our game, and then but then we had like a serious yoga instructor, so like she was like pushing us and like we would be in there sweating and like falling and like
Yes.
super tired. So I was like, it was surprising. I didn't know yoga was that intense.
Right. Nah, because I was doing like hot yoga. And it's what I liked about it is I don't want to say it was competitive, but it was like the instructor definitely pushed you
Right.
to be better. So I think that's what drew me to that. So it's been difficult to kind of replicate that on my own because it's just me by myself in my room.
Mhm.
But I've been doing what I can. So
Right. Okay. So now I want to get a little bit into talking about your background, your upbringing, and things of that nature. So tell us a little bit about your background, maybe the community you come from, and your family.
sure. So I was born in Washington, D.C., and I have lived in Prince George's County, Maryland since I was 4 years old. And that's where I grew up. I went through the public school system there. And for context, did I say PG? Prince George's County,
Yeah.
that's what it stands for, is the wealthiest majority Black county in the United States. And it's located right outside of DC, like 20 minutes. And honestly, I I didn't realize how special it was to grow up in PG until I left. And it's funny because a lot of the time, like if you come across someone from PG, like they have so much pride in where they're from and it shows. And I began to realize what people mean by that. And I guess I began to realize just, yeah, like I said, like how special of a place it is. Like it's just so unique. And it just honestly growing up there just made me feel so reaffirmed in my own identity. And that's why I think I didn't have I think everyone struggles a little bit in their identity when they get to
Mhm.
college, but I think that my transition was a little bit easier because I was, reaffirmed as to
Right.
who I was as a person earlier on in my life because everyone around me looked like me. I think PG definitely focuses on Black excellence.
Hmm.
And, that's something that I definitely took for granted growing up. But now looking back, I'm really glad to have grown up in an environment like that.
That's really empowering because what I notice a lot of times for um, black student athletes who come to largely predominantly white universities, coming from uh, communities where there's that are predominantly black, but maybe I guess less privileged in the sense of like economically. Um, I feel like they struggle more with their identity once getting into that new space and being outside of that box. So I think that's really interesting how PG has empowered you in a lot of ways to be reaffirmed in your identity and to continue to thrive once you did leave. So would it be fair to say that coming from PG County has like given you a unique perspective on life or just the expectation to do well or to succeed once you did leave?
Yeah, I can definitely say that. And I guess just to go back to my first point, I'll definitely say like my transition to college wasn't the easiest. And there were a lot of moments where I did struggle with my identity. And because I had never been in an environment that was majority white in my whole life.
Right.
So to now be thrust into this environment as an 18-year-old Black woman, I'm like, what's going on? Like, I don't
Mhm.
get this. I tried my best to fit in at first, and then I kind of realized like that wasn't for me either. um and yeah, I think the biggest thing about growing up in PG was it gave me the ability to I think the biggest thing is it instilled this sense of confidence in me,
Mhm.
and sureness of who I was, so that when I came here and I started to realize like like this is not how I should be treated, like this is not how people should be talking, just about whatever it was. Like it gave me my voice, and it gave me the ability to actually stand up for what I knew was right. And I would say like that's one of the biggest things PG did for me, and I'm so grateful for that. Like I think about that every day in my life.
Yeah, that's really powerful, because I know, at least for myself, I kind of struggled gaining those self advocacy tools upon first coming to college, and that was something I had to grow into and learn how to do after being there for some time. But that's really cool to hear that, PG has been the source of that empowerment for yourself. Um, and then also, let's see, what were the factors that contributed to your decision to attend Clark?
That's a good question. So my public school was one of the better public schools in the area. I was in like a STEM magnet program that you have to test into type of situation. But still, and it's funny because going through the system, we really thought we were like the cream of the crop out here. You know what I mean? And then I got to college up here, and, people are telling me they had 3 college counselors. And I'm like, I think I talked to my high school counselor one time, like
Right.
in my whole 4 years in high school. You know what I mean? Wait, sorry, what was the question?
Oh, I was just asking some of the deciding factors that went into your decision to attend Clark.
Right. So I would say for the most part, students who chose to go to college, or who had the resources to go to college, I should say, either ended up, for the most part, either ended up going to the University of Maryland, which is right down the road from my high school, or they would go to an HBCU in the area. We're right by Howard University. Hampton is a few hours away in Virginia. Bowie State University is also in PG County. My dad actually teaches there. And those were the usual options. And I knew that I wanted to play soccer in college, and I knew that I kind of had to play soccer in college because I wasn't the best student in high school. And I knew that I needed that type of schedule in order to succeed. And that was even before I knew I wanted to eventually become a doctor. So I think that I definitely made the right decision. Unfortunately, a lot of HBCUs don't have soccer teams.
Right.
So I kind of had to make the decision of like, do I, kind of do what everyone else is doing and what would make me comfortable, go to Maryland or go to an HBCU, or do I go somewhere else and play soccer and kind of have like a different experience than I think most people had going to my high school and then going to college after. And my junior year of high school, I actually ended up joining a club team in Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a predominantly white, I think it's the wealthiest county in Maryland. So that was a very different experience for me. But soccer in the United States works under the pay to play model. So I didn't really have another option. That was kind of the avenue I had to go down in order to play college soccer. And, I'm grateful that my parents provided me with that opportunity. And my club coach was extremely helpful. I think I'm very grateful to him for even giving me a chance, because I think a lot of people would look at me and, my skill set at the time and be like, I why even bother? But he really helped me with my recruiting process. He, was helping me figure out what schools I should be looking at, because like I said, I didn't meet with my high school counselor very frequently. And he knew that I was interested in psychology, and he recommended I look at Clark because they have a really good reputation for their psychology department. Okay. And I came to Worcester with my mom in January of my senior year. It was my very last visit, actually, like very late in the game. And it's cliche, but there was just something about Worcester that reminded me of home in a certain way. And I was just like, yeah, like this is it. And, I think I made the right decision.
I think that's that can send a great message to students who want to go to college and play sports, and also for students who are already there, in terms of you making a decision that was best for you and from multiple accounts in terms of athletically, like you knew you wanted to continue to play soccer at the next level, so that went into your decision. And then also with your intended major, psychology, going to Clark because of that. So I think that can serve as a message to be, don't put all your eggs in one basket, or don't, go to a program because they have um, one specific thing that appeals to you. Like, um, choose the university that is going to help you develop the most in terms of what you see yourself doing in the future. So I think that's really cool, because a lot of younger student athletes don't have the maturity to be able to look at it from all those perspectives of, like, which university is going to fulfill me academically, athletically, socially, and all those different experiences, and using those to make their decision. So
Right. And thankfully, I had the adults in my life who, were able to set aside time and actually help me through that process, like my parents and my club coach. So, without them, I really don't know what I would have been able to accomplish. So,
yeah, I can relate to that too, because like my dad, he played college football at San Diego State University as well. So when it came time for me to make that decision, I had already known, what things to consider when making the decision from learning from his experiences. And so I think that's really unique. Um, I think that's a real advantage of having parents or people in your life who have walked in your shoes and who have done it before, and who can help you out in that way. Obviously with both of your parents being student athletes as well, back during their time. So
right. Mm-hmm.
okay. Um, so I think you touched on it a little bit already, but just in case you have anything to add, I wanted to ask, how was the transition for you coming from a predominantly Black neighborhood in PG County to um, a predominantly white institution in Clark University?
So it's funny that you asked that. I think depending on who you ask,
Mhm.
that's not me. If they were looking in on my journey, they might have different things to say. But from my perspective, I definitely think at the beginning, I had a little bit of like an assimilationist moment, just because it was like I had never been in an environment with majority white people. I
Right.
didn't really know how to comport myself in that environment. And I probably just, kind of went into survival mode and was like mimicking them, if you will.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I didn't. So I'm also on the e-board of the Black Student Union as well as the Caribbean African Student Association here at Clark, but I didn't join those clubs until my sophomore year of college. And the reason is, and my friends always make fun of me for this because they're like, oh, you were just out there doing your soccer thing, whatever. But my reason for not joining at first is because I didn't realize how important it is to have those affinity spaces, because I never had to join a space like that when I was in high school because everyone in my high school looked like me. So I didn't realize like how important it was to actually seek out those friendships and those relationships. And then I think my sophomore year is kind of when I realized like, oh, I don't feel like I'm being 100% myself all the time. Like, I think that I should reevaluate the relationships I have in my life and, start to form new ones. So I think it definitely took me some time. But growth is necessary in college. And I think everyone goes through a lot of growth in their 4 years in college. And, I'm not exempt from that. And I'm really looking back on it now as a senior, like I'm grateful for what I went through.
Right. Yeah. I think comparing my experience to yours, like, you obviously play soccer, which is predominantly a white sport at your university. Am I right?
Right. In the
Yeah.
US, it is.
Okay. Yeah. And then for me, on the other hand, like playing football, like 70% of the players in the NFL are Black. So football is a largely Black space. So even though at my university, only 3% of the students are Black, within football, at least half of us are Black.
Mm.
So I feel the same way in terms of me not, like, I didn't join any of those affinity spaces until later, way later in my college career, because I would always just roam around with my Black friends that were on the football team or that were on the basketball team or other sports teams, because, you know, that provided me with, I guess, enough community at the time to where I felt like, you know, I didn't need to venture out into other spaces. But I really have realized the importance of kind of balancing the two and stepping outside of your comfort zone in terms of, you know, only associating with athletes and people that you know, and actually going out and building those connections to, you know, other Black students who may not be athletes, because they do have their own unique experience at the university, dealing with the same issues that we all deal with. And then they just, I feel like they just, being in those spaces have provided me with so much more perspective on the experience of being at a predominantly white university as a Black student. So
Right. And I would say, like, now, knowing what I know now, I think my friends and I really do make a concerted effort to, you know, reach out to the Black first years and like non-athletes, athletes, whoever, and just be like, hey, like, are you good? Like, how's your transition? Like, just making sure that they feel supported. Because we did have a few people that, you know, we were cool with that ended up transferring because they were just like, I don't feel like I can grow here. Like, I don't feel supported, whatever have you. And we don't want to see that, you know? So
exactly. Yeah. Okay. Um, let's see. Okay. So next I wanted to ask, were there any particular events that took place um, within your life, either during your time as a student athlete, or just like within the larger context of society? Have there been any events or issues that have happened that have, I guess, pushed you to use your platform um, as a Black student athlete to create change? I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, I can kind of use this time to talk about why we started Cake, if you want.
Yeah. So I was just hoping that led into that anyways, because I was going to ask that next. But yeah, you can talk about that.
All right, cool. Yeah, that's a good question. So I just feel like, okay, so my sophomore year actually is when I became closer with my good friend Ayala Watson, who is currently the president of the Black Student Union, as well as my co-president and co-founder of the Clark Athletics Inclusion Coalition. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but essentially our sophomore year, we began to see that the retention rates of Black student athletes at Clark were pretty low. So people were either leaving their team or leaving the school altogether. And we wanted to get a better sense of why this was happening. Obviously, we were only sophomores, so we didn't have a full understanding of the history of the athletic department at Clark. Right. And so we began to create a survey that we were going to send out to Black student athletes, but you know, school kind of got in the way of that. We were pretty busy that semester. And so we decided to hold off. But we, you know, we had just been hearing about some of the incidents that had occurred in our athletic department, just like in terms of like racial microaggressions and similar things. And so in the beginning of our junior year, we actually approached our athletic director just to have a conversation about what we were seeing in the department, why we felt things were kind of going unaddressed, and to see what we could change within the department. And we were met with, I don't want to say hesitation, but she basically told us that she didn't have the resources to address the issue herself, which I think is interesting considering she's the athletic director, but that's neither here nor there. And essentially, she directed us to a few coaches in the department who she thought would be helpful resources for us. And we eventually we formed a small working group of a few student athletes and coaches just to kind of address the issues of inequity and things that we were seeing in the department. And so, yeah, it's something that we kind of stumbled upon. And I think that as we've grown as a group, well, I would say the mission of our group has changed a lot since we started. We didn't really know what we were doing at first, just because, like I said, this mission of this group was kind of put on us, or the burden of educating the department was put on us as Black female student athletes. That was interesting. And I think that it says a lot about our society, because I think I see this a lot in society as well. The burden is usually put on Black people to do the educating, specifically Black women.
Yeah.
But over the years, we've just tried to narrow our focus and narrow our mission. And currently, I didn't really get into our title. So we're the Clark Athletics Inclusion Coalition. And I actually suggested this title as a joke because the initials stand for cake, but it just stuck. It stuck. And, I think that now cake has a lot of recognition in the department as well as across the university. We do a lot of partnering activism with other organizations on campus, like the Black Student Union, Student Council, and other organizations like that. But mainly what we do as an organization is we try to provide resources to the student athletes as well as the coaches to educate themselves and to kind of facilitate discussion, because I feel like where white people tend to have the most trouble is just getting the conversation started, because they feel like they don't want to say the wrong thing and they don't want to be judged, and which I understand. Everyone has to start somewhere. And what I always like to say is, like, because people say that the way that they grew up in a very racially homogenous area, and they never had to think about race, right? Because everyone looked like them. They didn't grow up with anyone who was Black, and in the same way, I didn't really grow up with that many non-Black people. So I never really had to worry about race either. But coming to a predominantly white institution as a Black woman, I had to take the time to educate myself and learn the vocabulary of the things that I was feeling and the things that I was witnessing. And so that's mainly what we do. So we facilitate discussions within the department, like across teams. We do that about once a month. We also facilitate discussions as needed. If a team requests us to facilitate a discussion, for example, we can do that. The athletic department has also formed a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee based on the list of demands that we put out over the summer of 2020. And this list of demands was basically just addressing things that we saw or we felt needed to change within the department. And I will say that they've been getting some work done, which we're happy with. Obviously, the work is never done, and we all have to, contribute towards the work. Right. But I would definitely say CAKE has had a large impact on athletics, at least in my 4 years. And I've heard from, coaches who have been here longer that the department has completely changed from, what they knew it to be 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna pause real quick to grab my charger. I can just edit this part out. All right. I thought I had it plugged in, but my outlet is turned off.
It's so funny because my co-founder Ayala, she actually has a podcast too. And they were doing like a series on different activists at our school, and they did like an episode on me. So like I'm glad that I had that to do first, because it's like I'm talking about a lot of different stuff. So, and that one was definitely like more rough for me. I was like, wait, I don't even know what I do. So it's good that I had that to like use at first. So
okay. So yeah, we'll start back now. I just wanted to, I guess, further emphasize or highlight a point you made about Black women often having to do the work of educating people in our society. I feel like what you just explained with your experience with that kind of parallels that of our founder for CADSA. Her name's Michaela, and when I had the conversation with you last time, and I was telling you about how we got started in Alexis Brown, who was a former gymnast at our university, when she had took a knee during the national anthem at one of the gymnastics meets, that kind of like lit a spark under the university and the athletic department to address like diversity and inclusion issues on the campus. And so I know just from being there that she um, had to face a lot of that of, why do I have to be the one, I'm already a student athlete, which is plenty of work for me to do to be a full-time student and basically a full-time athlete. Why do I have to be the one to educate everyone about, the struggles that we face as Black people and as Black student athletes on this campus? That's shouldn't that be what our these positions within athletics be for? Shouldn't they be the ones addressing these issues and making sure that equity is brought um, to our Black student athletes? Like, it's just horrible that in our society that the people who are facing injustice and oppression, they're the ones who have to address it. It's like, if you're a victim of a crime, you shouldn't be the one having to solve the mystery, um, so I definitely feel what you were saying there, and I definitely agree. Like, it's been throughout it's been a long history of Black women having to do most of the work of pushing people to help us create change. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating, and it's caused a lot of internal conflict with myself. And I speak to my mom frequently. We probably talk every day. And, every day we get on the phone and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why are we doing this? This is not my job. And she's like, it is your job. If you don't do it, who will? And that's really what it comes down to. Like, because I would say the people at my school, I would say 95% of the organizers on my campus are either women or non-binary. And I think that we all have just come to an understanding of, like, if we don't do it, who will? And none of us want to sit on the sidelines and just see nothing happen. Like, that's not an option for us. And I think we've just come to that realization. It's unfortunate because obviously to constantly have to talk about these things and stand up for yourself to get human rights is very traumatizing. But I think that we formed a really solid support system, and that's kind of the biggest way that we just make sure that we, get through this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then what you said about women and non-binary people, like you said, like these are some of the most oppressed people in our society, women and people who identify as non-binary, and that with the intersection of them being like from a historically marginalized ethnicity or race of people, what type of trauma is that doing to them to where they have to be victim of all of these systems, but then they have to relive that trauma by just to fight for the people to come after them to not have to uh to I guess experience those things. And then also, with like the movements that we have, the social movements that we have, even though women and non-binary people are largely the ones who are leading these movements, they're never I guess the cover athletes or the face of these movements. It's always the most appealing characters that are I guess put out in front and glorified for their roles in contributing to the movement. And it's never women or non-binary people or anyone else who identifies as LGBTQ plus who is recognized for their contribution. So I think that's really key to consider. Okay. Um, so next, I kind of wanted to ask. So last summer, we saw a wave of protests associated with Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement, and just the human rights issue of sparing Black people in this country their lives, unarmed Black people their lives with the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and so many others. I kind of just wanted to ask, what was your feeling or response to these things happening, or what were some approaches that you took as a leader for Cake um, in addressing these issues?
That's a good question. I feel like the summer of 2020, just to be candid, was one of the most frustrating
Mm-hmm.
times in my whole life, just because I feel like at the time I was probably at the height of my awareness of like race relations in the US. And it was frustrating. It was just like, you know, I was interning by day, protesting at night, you know, just being so close to DC. My friends and I we were out there practically every day last summer, either in DC or around PG. And it was frustrating because it's just like, on one hand, it sucks to see people who, you know, you consider a friend be silent on these issues, but then it also sucks to see people who you consider a friend be, I guess that have been the only time that they're vocal about issues, and obviously it died down, which is unfortunate because it's just like this is our everyday lived experience. Definitely. It's not something that we just get to tune in and out of. I remember seeing one thing over the summer about like I think it was called like allyship burnout. And I'm like, what do you mean allyship burnout? Like, what are you burnt out about? Like, it's not like y'all are turning on the news every day and seeing another Black person dead and being like, and being able to relate on a level where it's like, that could be, you know, that could be my brother, that could be my partner. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, y'all don't relate to that. That was difficult. And I think at that point, my friends and I were just like, you know, we can't just keep tiptoeing around the issue and trying to appease to white feelings. And that was really the time that we, as an organization, so CADSA decided to facilitate discussions about police brutality for all 17 varsity teams on our campus. So we did each one individually, just to be able to have a more in-depth conversation, and for players to be able to connect with their own teammates on issues and kind of like, I guess, feel more comfortable in that space. Right. And I would definitely say some conversations went better than others. But, you know, I think that those discussions over the summer really set the tone for this upcoming year. And I think coaches also started to realize that they need to do better in educating themselves and making sure that they, you know, hold their players to a certain standard, because I think a lot of the times these coaches see the players in themselves. So they're like, you know, I was like that when I was their age. Like, they don't have to go and educate themselves. Like, they're here to play their sport. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's not like that anymore. And it can't be like that anymore, because it's just like, y'all are not retaining Black athletes, and you wonder why. It's because you're not supporting them in any way. You know, like, you're saying you want them to be the best athlete that they can be, but it's like, they can't do that if they're being microaggressed in the locker room. Right. It's not going to happen, because that's what they're thinking about, instead of, you know, scoring goals or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's something that my team really realized. So my roommate, Danielle Black, she's the vice president of CADSA this year. And she's also on the women's soccer team here at Clark. And we facilitated the discussion for women's soccer. And my team, I love them to death. We always love to call ourselves the best team on campus. You know, we have the highest GPA on campus, 3.8, really high. But I think, like, so at the end of our discussion, basically, I read out a list of pretty much every racist thing that I remember a teammate ever saying to me my 4 years here. And I think that really stuck with people, just because it was like, it's 4 years later and I still remember all of these things, because it's just like, that stuff doesn't leave you, you know? Yeah. And it's tough to work through, because it's like, these are my teammates and I love them. And, you know, whenever someone would say something to me like that, I would always address it on the spot, but it's like, the rest of the team doesn't see that. I would keep it between me and that person. And I think, like, just me reading out that list, although it was very, very difficult for me to do, I think it was very helpful for the team to see, like, this happens more frequently than you think, and we're supposed to be the best team on campus, you know? And it's like, the list was still long. So it's like, imagine what it's like on other teams for other people. Like, it can't be good. So clearly we need to move forward as a team, and we need to do better and hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we need to do better as a department as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's all truth. Um, I think for me, uh, with everything that went on last summer, it did kind of it opened up the space for conversations to be had, and I'm speaking specifically about the football team at my university. But I don't feel like too much uh, was taken from those conversations. I think they were poorly constructed,
Hmm.
um, and I don't think there was much engagement at all. So what I mean by that specifically is um, throughout the summer, what we typically do in normal years prior to 2020 is we have like unity groups for our football team where we take a group of players and a different coach. So the group of players is completely random. Like you'll have some players at one position, like you'll have a quarterback, like me, a DB, you'll have like a running back, and they try to do it to where it's typically people on the team who may not interact as often. So typically it's people of different identities within the group and uh, probably different personalities. But what we did this year is that for our unity meetings, rather than having them focused primarily on like, I don't know, just like how are you doing in school, like how's life in general, how's like what's your motivation type thing, we tried to our coach tried to focus more on the racial aspect, but I think it was poorly planned because he was the facilitator of the conversation. Now, I'm not, like we said earlier, like Black student athletes shouldn't be the ones who are facilitating the conversation, but I think what he could have done better was go out to someone on our campus or someone who gets paid to do this work. Like, we don't get paid for anything. We don't, like, okay, we get a scholarship to be a student and an athlete, and then we have all these responsibilities on campus, but we don't get paid for the work we do as organizers and leaders on the campus. So don't come to us. There are people on our campus who get paid to do the work of educating other people about these types of issues. So why not go to one of them? Like we have people within our department, our athletic department that do that. Why not go to one of them and you work with them to coordinate something rather than half-heartedly, I guess, putting this content out for us. And don't get me wrong, like I really appreciated his efforts. Like our head coach, he is white, but I really appreciated everything he did to try to address the situation. But it was kind of done so in an unnatural manner, because, like for example, one time he kind of we were he was trying to facilitate a conversation about race and everything and those type of issues on our team, but he just brought it up out of the blue. Like we had a team meeting about we just had a normal team meeting. Everybody thought it was a team meeting about football, and then so we talk a little bit about um, football, and then out of nowhere he brings up issues about race and everybody's thrown off guard. There's no engagement. And I'm telling you, the meeting was dead silent for like 30 minutes straight until somebody who was black said something. And then after that, what it really became was just a conversation between the black student athletes on the team about issues because no one else spoke.
Mm.
And then it was the same thing within our individual unity groups. Like he tasked us with watching the 13th film one time. And so we watched that, and then we came in our unity groups and met about it. And then, and that was really disheartening because I had some teammates who were, out driving and stuff when we were supposed to be having this conversation, doing a bunch of other things, not really engaged or paying attention. And then it became that same thing of mostly the black student athletes being the ones holding the conversation or talking or initiating the conversation. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I get that you're not comfortable with these issues, but do you think we are like
Right.
the ones going through these things? Like, just say something.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where my frustration came from with all of it, and then it's kind of died down more recently in terms of the occurrence of those things those conversations taking place. But yeah,
Mm,
I'm sorry to take up time, but
no.
I just thought that connected well with what you were saying.
Yeah, that's honestly, I definitely see, I 100% see where you're coming from. And I think, when we did the mandatory facilitated discussions, it was a lot of the same. Like the people who, we don't have a lot of Black student athletes in our department at all, but it was more like the people who are the most knowledgeable on the subject were the people who were speaking the most.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, or the people who are interested in social justice and equity are the ones that come to CAPE
Yeah,
meetings on Sundays. And it's like, I love that y'all come, but it's like y'all are not the ones that need to hear this. Like it's other people
yeah,
who need to hear it. And I don't know. With that being said, I know that some people who um, have had issues in the department in the past have come to CAPE meetings after I urged them to come to meetings, and um, they have expressed to me that they're grateful for that space, and even if they come and they're silent, like at least they're listening, and that's the
yeah,
first step. Honestly, I think, just to go back to your point about reaching out to people on campus who get paid for that, I definitely hear you. And that was one of our demands that we posed to the department, was to create an official, because obviously our school is smaller, so we have less of these
yeah.
resources and positions, but we urged them to create a position that was that would act as a liaison between athletics and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and that this is a paid position because
Mm-hmm.
no free labor. And
Yeah.
they actually just fulfilled that demand. And the assistant women's basketball coach, who is also the cake advisor, Coach Denisha Parks, she is now the official liaison, and it's a paid position, which obviously we're very happy about. But yeah, no, I hear you for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
It's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, transitioning to the next thing. When I was doing some research on you before we met the first time, I noticed that you don't have a roster photo to go with your bio um, for the soccer team online, and I just wanted to know, could you tell everyone why that is?
Sure. So last year in the summer of 2020, the Black Student Union, in conjunction with the Clark University Student Council, started a campaign called the hashtag Not Your Token campaign. And essentially, what the purpose of this campaign was. Oh, so this campaign went hand in hand with the demands that the Black Student Union put out. So, just for further context, the Black Student Union put out a list of demands last summer as well. And our demands, the CAKE demands, kind of follow the BSU demands, but in regard to the athletic department. And it's a little bit different. Like it has to do with recruiting methods and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Not Your Token campaign is basically a campaign where students, Black students, particularly at Clark, as well as non-Black students, so any type of ally, uh, basically wrote a letter to Clark University to revoke their consent to be used on any type of marketing materials. And the reason for this is that it's just so frustrating. I don't know if you've experienced this at your school, but I remember my freshman year, I was in the library studying for my biology exam, and I am over here absolutely struggling. Like, I need as much time as I can get. And this photographer for Clark comes up to me. Oh, I also looked horrible because I just came from practice. But this photographer from Clark came up to me and he was like, "Can I take some pictures of you for, some brochure?" And I was like, "Sure," like thinking it was going to be like a 5-minute thing. He's in the library taking pictures of me for like 30 minutes. Keep in mind, I'm surrounded by my white teammates. He's not taking pictures of any of them. And it's just like such an awkward like scenario. And that's not the only time that I've been asked to do something like that, especially being one of the few Black student athletes. I've had to participate in things like that as well. Um, and it's one thing to ask me for pictures or any type of interview for things that I'm actually doing on campus and the things that I've accomplished. It's another thing to just use me for my skin tone, literally.
Yeah.
And a lot of Black students had the same sentiment. It's like, why are our brochures out here looking like an HBCU, but our actual like percentage of Black students on campus is, I think it's hovering around 4%. Like it's not adding up. So we were just like, until y'all meet the Black Student Union demands, we're not going to let you use our faces for, you know, your little diversity incentives. It's not happening. So that was our main thing. And, you know, being a Black student athlete, we decided to extend that into athletics. So we had a lot of athletes, Black and non-Black, revoke their consent to be used in material. And that's mainly for roster pictures and things like that. It's not really action shots because there's multiple people in action shots usually. So that's a little different, but that's kind of where we decided to make our biggest impact and make sure that they actually heard us.
Yeah, when you were talking to me about that last time, I thought it was really cool because I feel like most of the time student athletes can feel powerless when navigating this system of intercollegiate athletics, right? Like even compared to their own coaches, you know, on up to like the chancellor of the university or like the NCAA itself. Like student athletes, I feel like sometimes we can feel really powerless in terms of wanting to step up and speak out against things, or you know, to use our ability to give consent however we want, you know. And so but I think what's so reassuring is that, you know, when we all come together and engage in collective action, then we can really impact change at our universities, within our sports, everything. So so I think that was really cool, what y'all are doing over at Clark, even with something as small as that, right?
Right.
Because it does have an impact, and it does let the department know, like, you know, we're not gonna let you just use us like this. You know, we want you to see, you know, all of us as human beings, and I guess bring attention to everything that we do, and not only just use us to further your diversity goals, or you know.
Exactly. And, you know, I think that we've definitely been heard. The president actually reached out to, well, he didn't reach out to us. We had a meeting with him and he brought up the Not Your Token campaign, and he urged us to reconsider. Obviously, we decided not to do that, and the campaign is still going on. But I think that just little comment really made us know that, you know, we're doing exactly what we need to be doing right now. So
Yeah. Okay, so next I wanted to get a little bit into the Black Student Athlete Summit. Um, so for those who don't know, the Black Student Athlete Summit is an annual conference held at the University of Texas at Austin, where pretty much Black student athletes throughout the country from all conferences, divisions, um, come together and listen to keynote speakers. There's networking events, a bunch of stuff um, for Black student athletes to engage and, you know, just to connect with one another. That's actually how I found Inonge, was through the Black Student Athlete Summit, and just through the network that's been created because of it, and the platform that's been created because of it. And Inonge had the honor of presenting at the Black Student Athlete Summit this year, which was virtual because of COVID. But I just kind of wanted you to speak a little bit on that experience of um, presenting at the summit with Dr. Devin Walker.
sure. So this was actually my first year at the summit. I wanted to go last year when it was in person, but I was getting ready to leave for my study abroad program, so I didn't really have time. And you know, when this year's conference rolled around, Chase Moore, who also he's a former University of Texas football player, he reached out to me and he, you know, just reminded me like, hey, you know, it's time to sign up for the summit. It's going to be great this year. It's virtual. And I went to register for the event and I couldn't pay the registration fee. And I was like, dang, like, you know, this sucks. I really wanted to go. He suggested I reach out for funding from my university. I did that. I never heard back. And I was just like, you know, this sucks. I was really looking forward to attending. And, you know, I think about a week later, Chase reached out to me again and he said, you know, I know that you said that you wouldn't be able to attend because you couldn't pay the fee, but would you be open to actually speaking at the conference this year, because he knows a little bit about my background, just as like what I do here at Clark and my experiences. And so he connected me with Dr. Devin Walker, who is, I believe he's the director of global leadership and social impact at UT.
Yeah.
And he suggested that I present with him for one of the sessions that was titled Get Global Black Athletes Abroad. And basically the point of the session was just to talk about my time studying abroad as a Black student athlete. So last year, in the spring of 2020, I had the opportunity to study abroad at the University of Cape Town in South Africa.
Wow.
Oh.
I didn't say anything. I was just.
Okay. So last year I had the opportunity to study abroad at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And it was originally supposed to be a 20-week program, but obviously it got cut short due to COVID. I was still able to spend 8 weeks there, and it was amazing. And basically the purpose of our session was just to talk about how important it is for identity formation as a Black student athlete to study abroad. Because the way that we like to think about it is like, there's a stigma attached to being a student athlete, right? People like to put you in a box and be like, you're only a student athlete, like you can only do this on your campus. And then obviously if you're a Black student at a predominantly white institution, people already have a certain image of you, and expectations of what you're able to accomplish. And so as a Black student athlete, it's honestly like a very doubly stigmatizing experience to be at a predominantly white institution.
Yeah.
And so if you are able to study abroad, that kind of gives you an opportunity to, look within yourself and see what you're capable of doing, like outside of sports and outside of, what assumptions people might be making about you on your campus. Funny enough, I actually played soccer for the University of Cape Town while I was there. So not exactly like a soccer free experience, but I will say that the way that college sports is kind of operationalized is a lot different, was a lot different from how it is in the US. And I would say, like, in terms of identity, not that much emphasis is placed on the student athlete aspect. And so, I was able to explore these other aspects of my identity, and, it kind of made me think about the different things that I maybe want to do after graduation and things like that. And, my time in Cape Town, also for further context, my mother is from Zambia, which is in Southern Africa, not too far from South Africa. And, that, like, being Zambian as well as studying abroad in Cape Town kind of made me realize, like, my path doesn't have to be linear, and I can do whatever I want with it. And I think that's what schools don't want you to think, especially if you're a student athlete with a scholarship. They want to be able to kind of like control you in terms of the things that you do and what you experience in your 4 years. And especially being pre-med, I decided, like, I don't want to just do what people expect of me or like think I'm going to do. And that was also part of me going abroad. And, as a result, I actually decided to apply to a 1-year fellowship program called Princeton in Africa. And I'm actually a finalist for that. So, if I got that, I would be able to work on the continent for a year. So we'll find out about that.
Yeah, congrats. That's exciting. So I really hope that you get that. But yeah, that kind of leads into what I wanted to ask you next. We're almost done. Just a couple more questions. I really wanted to get into just the career aspects of who you are and your aspirations in terms of the field of medicine and everything. So I guess I'll start by asking, upon graduation, you did tell me that you'll be working towards a Doctor of Medicine degree. How do your goals to practice medicine intersect with the work you've been doing to advocate for Black student athletes?
That's a good question. I feel like the work that I do in CAKE, as well as the work that I aspire to do in research and also in medicine, because I'm aspiring to get my MD, PhD, so to be a physician scientist. I feel like it all comes down to a common goal of, you know, who do I do this for? And that answer will always be Black people. You know, I think about, you know, what my family had to sacrifice in order to you know, get me where I am today,
Right.
and how my community, PG, really lifted me up, and made me the person, literally made me the person I am today. And it would just be so selfish of me to look at all of these things that others have done for me and to walk away from that. I can't do that, you know, and I have no intention of doing that. Like I always say, like my first paycheck, half of it is going to my family in Zambia, the other half is going to my high school. Like that's just what it has to be, you know, like,
Yeah.
And that's really what it comes down to, is just everything that I'm interested in, whether it's, you know, research or sports, it all has to tie back to my identity and my community. And yeah, that's the biggest thing for me. And it always has been and it always will.
Yeah, I love how connected to your community you are. I see, and we see that a lot with a lot of Black student athletes, like just right, our communities being everything in terms of our source for inspiration and our aspirations, you know, to further ourselves, to further our educations, even though, you know, it's really hard, the work we're doing, being students, being athletes, being leaders in our communities, um, and just, you know, putting ourselves out there and really pushing ourselves because we have our communities behind us. So, yeah, that's really cool. And then, lastly, I kind of just wanted to ask, how do you balance everything? I know, it's difficult, and you might not have it all figured out, like most of us don't. But how do you balance, you know, being a student, being a student athlete, you know, being a leader in your community, and for Black student athletes on your campus? What's your best advice for balancing it all?
That is a good question. Do I balance it? The jury's out. No, just in terms of what I do, because honestly, I don't have free time in my schedule, and it's been that way for probably about 2 or 3 years now.
Mhm.
Um, but just in terms of how I balance my time, first and foremost, I get my 8 hours of sleep. No one's messing with that. No one is interfering with that. Not the president. No one. No one is getting in the way of my 8 hours. And then after that, just in terms of like advice I can give, and this is something I struggle with as well. Say no to things. You know,
Yeah.
especially if you're doing any type of campus organizing, people are going to, you know, try to get you to go to this meeting and that meeting. And, you know, looking at my calendar, I think I have 4 meetings tomorrow, you know? And so like I struggle with it, but it is something that you have to practice and you'll get better at it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I keep a very meticulous record of things I have to do in my calendar. If I lose my calendar, I don't know what I would do with myself.
Yeah.
It would be over for me. I think I'd have to drop out, honestly. Um, but yeah, that's honestly just the biggest thing, is being proactive, and that's something that I've had to work at over time. Um, you know, my first year, honestly, I think that was the hardest. I was studying and I was getting the lowest grades. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So clearly I had to rework what I was doing. Like I can't be in the library until 3 in the morning because that's
Mhm.
not working for me, you know? So just being more efficient with my time and making better decisions on what I do with my time has been the biggest game changer for me over these past 4 years.
Mhm. Right. That's good advice. I know for me especially, I feel like playing sports my whole life has given me the structure, and I guess the ability to handle so many different things and so many different responsibilities, right? Just because even from being, you know, a little kid, like we play, we go to practice, we go to school, and you know everything, and so that's really primed me to be prepared uh, for this moment, to be able to handle all the responsibilities of a student athlete. I do struggle very much with saying no to things, so much. Like Oh, it's so bad. But what it does is like it just puts you in a bad situation sometimes where you're just like, I put way too much on my plate, like I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. So that's definitely something I've been able to work on throughout the past year with the pandemic and everything. At a point it really got to be too much for me, and so I had to take some things off of my plate. Like right now, we're having a spring season for football, but I'm not participating just because my mental and physical health were nowhere near what they needed to me in order to, really um, enjoy the process of, playing my sport and being out there every day. Um, and then not to mention I'm applying for grad school right now, so I already knew like I'm not going to be able to handle this, so I need to make some changes. And like even though it was really hard, like I've been playing football like my whole life, it was a decision I had to make, and it was super hard, but it was definitely worth it. And so I'm that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, because you know um, going to college and having these experiences has prepared me to be able to do that, to take that off of my plate, like such a big part of who I am. Like being like, okay, I'm not going to do this for a while. I don't think I would have been able to do that if it weren't for the development I've undergone since being at UC Davis. So definitely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely hear you on that. You know, yeah, just getting ready to go into my master's program this upcoming fall. I do have a year of eligibility left because of COVID.
Uh-huh.
Not sure if I'll use it, just because of the time constraints that my program has.
Yeah.
But so it'll definitely be a transition going
Mhm.
from playing soccer my whole life to mainly school, and also less extracurricular activities, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, no, I think we got this though.
Yeah, same.
It'll be
We
good.
got it. We
Yeah,
always do. We always find a way to get through it.
right.
Okay. And then lastly, do you have any advice for any Black student athletes or student athletes in general, in terms of helping them find their voice, or, becoming a leader in any realm of their lives?
Do I have advice? Honestly, the way so the advice that I give everyone who is having difficulty kind of being able to speak up and do what just if you're in a room and you hear someone saying the wrong thing and you feel like you should say something but you don't know how to go about it, the way that I like to think about that is I would rather be uncomfortable for the 15 minutes that I have to spend calling this person out than be uncomfortable every time they say it.
Right.
um, and that's kind of just, I think that goes for everything. If you feel uncomfortable as a Black student athlete or anyone in any type of situation, like on your team, in your department, at your school, like you deserve just as much as anyone else to be comfortable. You're spending 4 years of your life here, like that's not something to take lightly. um, and I guess just with that, just don't be afraid to step on toes. In this process, I can't say that everyone at this school is my best friend.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But it's just like I would rather stand up for what I know is right, and in order to make myself and people who look like me more comfortable than to kind of just go with how things have been going the past however many years. I don't think that's an option for us anymore. And I would also say just reach out to your community, like reach out and find people who can support you through this, because it's not going to be easy if we're being honest, but once you get through it, it's very rewarding. And I think it's just very serious, like you're literally changing the landscape of your department, of your institution, for the people to come next. So if it is something that you're considering, just make sure that you're going in with a game plan. And above all, make sure you're finding ways for people to support you, and to take care of yourself.
Definitely. So yeah, that'll wrap up our first episode. Thank you again, Inonge, for taking your time out of your busy schedule to do this. I truly appreciate it. I know everyone who will watch this will truly appreciate it, and continue to stay safe. Um, And yeah, so thank you everybody for watching. Thank you, Inonge, again for being a part of this, and have a good day. Okay.